The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Madam Clerk, please call to order.
Call the roll.
Alderman True, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Onowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, 25 present.
We're going to now just read the prayer. Ready? You guys ready? Almighty God, source of all authority, we humbly ask guidance in our deliberations and wisdom in our conclusions. Amen. Let's give a round of applause to Davy and Patsy. Patsy is the president of the Board of Aldermen, and Davy is the mayor from St. Louis Preparatory. Could you come up real quick? And the director is just going to take just a moment to tell you about the program before we begin, because all the kids over here represent elected officials. We even have the fire chief. Could the fire chief stand up? Fire chief? Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today. Brief introduction as far as the young people who are today. They're deemingly international, largest young men's fraternity in the world, and as honor to the Master Masons in St. Louis, they give us this designation of Legion of Honor. Legion of Honor sponsors the Youth and Government Day every year. In the past, they've taken over the St. Louis County and the city halls in the past, where each of the young men and women have sat in the particular offices for the day and have got a great education out of it. We're continuing this program this year. It's the second time down in the city of St. Louis. Every young man here or lady has a particular designated office, and they're here to learn and partake in the government. Later on this afternoon, they're going to take over the chambers here and actually take your positions and try to get some business done as aldermen. And so we're going to get a good lesson here this morning. I'd like to thank everybody for allowing us to be here, and it's a privilege. Thank you. Real quickly, the young ladies here are with the Job's Daughters or the Rainbow Girls, and the young men are with the DMLA. Thank you.
Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to have as my special guest Al with the firefighters, Celeste Reeder with the realtors, and then I have a very special guest with me, Glenn Smith, who's with Youth and Government, His position is assistant to the alderman. So, Glenn, welcome to the board.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today, Ronnie Auer, and also today, Kurt Scooby and Jim Sonnerman from the Water Department.
Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I would like to have as my special guest today from the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, David Holmes, Dick Kellett, Don Summers, and Mark Morgan. And I'd also like to have as my special guest today from Russ Carnahan's office, Tim Ogle. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
I'd like to have as my honored guest today, Gary Otten from the Painters District Council.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Oh, Alderman from the 16th.
I apologize. I missed from the 16th Ward, Steve Sprack with Communication Workers. Thank you.
Alderman from the 10th, anything to wrap us up on?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So glad to be here on March 9th. My regular scheduled guest, Mr. Steffen, is busy because this day, as you all know, in 1959, the Barbie doll was invented. He being the model for Ken, he is busy doing photographic shoots today. Thank you.
And then, so now we're just going to start going through this. Then we're going to go down to approval of the minutes. Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the February 24th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes.
We'll dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We'll dispense with line items 8 through 12. Second reading.
The following board bills were reported out of the Housing Committee. Board bills 261, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance pertaining to New Jerusalem Church of God in Christ at the Cathedral, located at 2047 East Grand, having as the subject matter the designation of the property as a St. Louis landmark containing definitions, design standards, and a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 265, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from G Local Commercial and Office District to D Multiple Family Dwelling District in City Block 1111 for property at 1455 Monroe, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 267, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from A Single Family Dwelling District and F Neighborhood Commercial District to the F Neighborhood Commercial District only in City Block 6260 for property at 5833 through 75 Chippewa, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 288, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance designating a portion of the city as a redevelopment area known as the 2727 Washington Redevelopment Area pursuant to Real Property Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act, establishing the 2727 Washington Special Allocation Fund, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 289, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and 4900 Manchester, TIF Incorporated, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 290, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $450,000 plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for 2727 Washington Redevelopment Project, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 295, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, amending ordinance 68971 and 67681, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and St. Louis Food Hub TIF containing a severability clause. Board Bill 296, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, amending ordinance 67678 and 68972, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $10,200,000 plus issuance cost maximum principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for City Hospital RPA 3 redevelopment project phase 2A. Board Bill 297, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project area, and a redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and St. Louis Food Hub TIF containing a severability clause. Board Bill 298, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving an amendment to the City Hospital TIF redevelopment plan pursuant to the Real Property Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act containing a severability clause. Board Bill 299, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $2,400,000 plus issuance cost maximum principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for City Hospital RPA 2 redevelopment project phase 2B-1 containing a severability clause. The following board bills were reported out of the Ways and Means Committee. Board Bill 30, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt and Alderwoman Cruzen, an ordinance relating to excess payments designated by any person, firm, or corporation on any water bill, personal property tax bill, real estate tax bill, or other bill in the city which is designated by ordinance for a city asset, services provided by the city for a nonprofit entity, minimum amount required annually for nonprofit agencies, maximum number of nonprofit agencies, and disposition of designated excess payments. Board Bill 245, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration a sum of $15,000 and other good and valuable consideration, a quitclaim deed to remise, release, and forever quitclaim unto Volpe Foods, certain city-owned property located in City Block 3998-D, known and numbered as 5151 Northrop. Board Bill 281, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, an ordinance approving a petition to establish the 1601 South Jefferson Community Improvement District, establishing the 1601 South Jefferson Community Improvement District. Board Bill 291, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in good consideration the sum of $10, a termination and a release of easement to cancel and terminate the easement over certain over certain privately owned property located in City Block 3946, commonly known as 3946 Papin Street. The following board bills were reported out of the Streets Committee. Board Bill 244, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service authorizing the 2012 St. Louis Works and 50/50 sidewalk program citywide containing the mayor's executive orders, contract advertising statutes, and a public work emergency clause. Board Bill 273, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate vehicle equestrian and pedestrian travel on a 15-foot wide L-shaped alley in City Block 5234, beginning at Clayton and ending at Taylor, same bounded by Clayton, Taylor, Interstate 64, and Euclid. Board Bill 279, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance authorizing and directing the street commissioner to take all necessary actions to honorarily designate the 3100 block of North Garrison as Reverend Theodore V. Foster Sr. Street. Board Bill 285, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance pertaining to valet parking, recommended and approved by the Parking Commission, providing a mechanism for the creation of valet parking zone permits, authorizing the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Metropolitan Tax Commission to provide for certain administrative and investigatory funds, authorizing the Director of Streets to charge certain fees containing penalty provisions and a severability clause. Board Bill 294, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental cooperation project agreement between the city and the Parking Commission and the North Broadway Cary Transportation Development District containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 300, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to vacate a portion of the air rights over a 6.5 feet wide portion of Olive Street adjacent to 3651 Olive Street in City Block 2287. Following board bills were reported out of the Parks Committee. Board Bill 80, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett and Alderwoman Young, an ordinance pertaining to Lafayette Park, providing that in addition to revenues derived from those sources specified in Section 5.74.060 of the Revised Code, revenues derived from sources in Lafayette Park specified by this ordinance shall be held in the Lafayette Park Fund. Board Bill 244, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, Villa, Behringer, and Vaccaro, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service authorizing and directing the execution of a cooperation agreement between the city by and through the Board of Public Service and the Metropolitan Park and Recreation District doing business as the Great Rivers Greenway District, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. That's the extent of our second readings.
Dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 204, sponsored by 204, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3610 Palm, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 210, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for Bremen Homes redevelopment area, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 229, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 1702 Carroll, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 230, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4100 Detente, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 257, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3867 through 71 Shenandoah and 2250 through 56 South 9th Street redevelopment area, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 272, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4557 Flatt, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 238, sponsored by Alderman Troop, an ordinance amending Ordinance 67789 by modifying the terms of a 20-year real estate tax abatement for 4229 Arbor in the Euclid Penrose Arbor redevelopment area. Board Bill 255, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3337 Missouri Avenue, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 256, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3200 through 3222 Texas, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 262, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2800 through 2802 Shenandoah, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 268, sponsored by Alderman Wessels, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3644 through 3646 Bates, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 269, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2010 Craft, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 274, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 925 through 927 South Sarah, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 275, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4537 Arco, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 276, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 4701 through 59 South Spring. That's the extent of perfection consent.
On from 13, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Perfect the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by Alderman from 13, seconded by Alderman from 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dispense with line item 16, third reading consent.
Board Bills 282, 283, 284, 243, 277, 278, 251, 258, 263, 264, 286, and 280.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have Board Bill 280 placed on the informal calendar, third reading informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that change.
So noted.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion for the third reading consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for third reading and final passage of the aforementioned bills excluding Board Bill 280.
Moved by the Alderman from 13th. Seconded by the Alderman from 23rd. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop. I didn't hear it. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Triplett. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Triplett. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. 24 aye votes.
Of the Alderman from the 13th. Third reading report of enrollment.
Board Bill 267, sponsored by Alderman Troop, an ordinance pertaining to the City Housing Conservation Program, repealing ordinance 68794 and enacting in lieu thereof a new section pertaining to the same subject matter.
Okay. Alderman from the first, recognized on third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 287.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I move for the adoption of Board Bill number 287 be third read and finally passed.
Moved by the Alderman from the first, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Alderman, please proceed.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, what this bill does is creates the conserve area in the new boundaries of the first ward that occurred during redistricting. We are hoping that by making the entire ward a conserve area, that the northern part of the city and the ward will receive city services that should automatically come, but with the additional cost of conserves, that those areas be served by the city departments. It would appear that with the layoff of city employees, that city services are being withheld, not only in North St. Louis, but across the city. And it seems like that's going to continue. But it's my hope that by giving the additional taxes to the people of the first ward, that will result in additional city services. If that's any questions, I would be happy to answer. If not, I renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 287. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop.
It's been a request for previous roll. Good job. I'm glad he was on the ball. Been a request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, motion carries.
That's the extent of third reading, report of engrossment, and final passage.
Now this part is the report of enrollment.
Board bills 282, 283, 284, 243, 277, 278, 287, 251, 258, 263, 264, 286, and 287.
Anyway, this is the part where we're all on the business piece, and the president shall in session fix his signature. Here too, man, that he's made to come out. You want to help with that? Anyway, all other business being suspended, the president shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. Stamp. I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution. Can I entertain a second on that motion? Seconded by the Alderman from 26. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 25th, for what purpose do you rise?
I would like to make an introduction, Mr. President.
Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to introduce my state representative, Representative Jacob Hummel, and with him today is also Representative Mary Still, who is also running for the 19th Senatorial District.
All right, excellent. Jacob and Mary, if you guys get a moment, if you would introduce yourself over here to the kids. These are all elected officials. In various different roles, and they would probably have, really enjoy meeting you guys. We've done the courtesy resolution. We have no resolutions up today, so I'm just going to say, dispense with line item 21, and then we have none of these. We dispense with line item 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers, March the 16th. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That's the extent of my announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion to excuse. If you're absent at a meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn. I move to excuse the alderman from the 2nd, 4th, and 19th wards due to necessary absence.
Moved by the alderman from the 13th, seconded by the alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from 13th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn the meeting until Friday, 10 a.m., March 16th.
You're going to say we stand adjourned and hit the gavel.
Okay. Now?
Yeah.
We stand adjourned.